All right, so it's time for the 1-year Cactus Terrarium update video, and a lot of people were skeptical. They said, well, that terrarium holds too much humidity, those cacti are going to rot. I know Serpa Design made a video with the Cactus Terrarium, and that also failed. So this is a video I unfortunately haven't been wanting to make. Mainly because I'm lazy, but the Cactus Terrarium is fine because I know how to grow plants. Okay, so let's talk about some of the problems I've run into with this terrarium. Overall, it's fine. One thing that I did though was I went to fertilize this one day. I used Miracle Grow 20-20-20 because I'm like, it doesn't really matter. It didn't burn the roots on any of the plants. The only thing was in this type of setup, when I soaked the soil with all that fertilizer water, especially such a strong fertilizer, I started getting algae kind of growing around the edges here where the soil is exposed to the sunlight because it's just glass. So not really a huge issue. As soon as this dries out completely, all of that algae should die off, theoretically, I hope. However, kind of a dumb mistake because I could have just watered it spot by spot, and then I would have prevented that from happening. However, I think my rationale was, well, I'm just going to soak the entire soil layer so that it's going to be full of nutrients so they can grow their roots. But looking back, it doesn't really matter because if you spot water them with fertilizer, they have all the nutrients they need and then they grow their roots and they grow bigger anyways. So just kind of a stupid mistake I did. I didn't really think of the consequences of what would happen if I soaked it in very strong fertilizer solution. So got a little bit of algae on the sides. So the next problem I ran into is some of these plants, they just got too big for this terrarium. So this cactus was back here, and you can see it's kind of above the edge of this terrarium. It kind of messed up the proportions, and I didn't know how large any of these were going to get when I bought them. They weren't even labeled with what species of cactus it is, so I just kind of crossed my fingers. And of course, it didn't really work for this one because it's way too tall. So I took it out of the terrarium, potted it up, and now I'll be using it in a how to grow a cactus video that I record sometime in the near future. And this is the same story with this one. It didn't get as tall, but it got wider and it's growing taller and taller. And I had it kind of over here in the edge against the glass. So it's kind of crooked, it just kind of didn't look right. So I pulled this out of there, put it in a separate container, and same story as the other one. I'll just use it for a how to grow cactus video. So that's why some plants are removed. They were just too tall. And then of course the Haworthia that was up here, I transferred it back, the other succulent. It just didn't match the aesthetic because I want to keep it kind of spiky and majority of cacti in here. And this one's kind of spiky and it has those white ridges on the leaves, so it kind of matches the prickly aesthetic. But that's why I just didn't want to get a jade plant, for example, and put it in here because the texture of the leaves just didn't really match. So finding plants to put inside of this terrarium for the goal that I have in mind is a little bit difficult. However, with the 4 plants we have left in here, it's not really a big deal, and I think it looks relatively nice because there's still open space, how there would be in a desert between each plants, because of course a desert isn't a big lush environment with plants everywhere overcrowding everything. So I think we're fine with the 4 that we have left in here. The next issue with this terrarium is that it's kind of difficult to swap stuff around. It's kind of fine if you just make this terrarium, you have all the cacti that stay small or succulents that stay small, and you just leave it. But what I had to do was, start pulling out a cactus this size, and of course a lot of soil comes up with it. And then if you want to transplant stuff here and there, you have to dig the sand away, then you put back in, dump the soil kind of back around it, dump the sand, but just inevitably there are some soil particles that get to the surface, and now there's just some soil particles here and there, which isn't a huge deal. However, I had to kind of, take them out. And I, of course, started rescaping this with new sand, which, kind of made me need to lift up the rocks a little bit to expose them again, lift up the cacti, kind of mess around with the replanting. So again, I wouldn't have had to do any of that if I knew which species of cactus I'm buying and not just going to Home Depot and picking stuff that, look small and saying, well, I hope that remains small and doesn't grow any larger. But of course, there isn't really like a specific, nursery that is really into cacti and has all this information provided. A lot of the stuff is sold unlabeled. So I'm just kind of blindly guessing, and it's not really a huge deal, but of course, just something that I ran into with the functionality of this terrarium. But like I said, overall, not really a whole lot of issues, and we're left with something that is still relatively nice looking, in my opinion. So the last thing is the functionality of this terrarium, because I think that was the biggest concern for a lot of people. It's in a fish bowl, there's no drainage, and isn't this retaining too much humidity? Not really, because it is still fairly open at the top, so everything can evaporate. And we do have the drainage layer, which lets the extra water drain away, so nothing ever rots in here. And the main point is that you can spot water stuff, and like I have that 1 gallon sprayer where I can just gently spray stuff and make sure the soil around the plant is soaked. I don't have to water the whole terrarium. I did it once with that fertilizer, but that was just kind of a silly mistake because I wanted the whole soil layer to be fertilized. I don't know, it just was kind of pointless. However, even that, it didn't really kill anything because I just let it dry out after that. That was about like 3 months ago, so everything is still fine. So yeah, I mean, imagine you have a terrarium like this and you never add any water. Obviously, it's going to be dry. So to combat any kind of buildup of moisture, you just water this little by little. You have to do it carefully. Maybe just do like a shot glass of water for each plant in here every 2 weeks. But it's not going to have anything rotting in here because you can just let it dry out and keep letting it dry out until it's to the point where the plants are shriveling. I mean, you don't have to get it that extreme, but just to demonstrate the idea, get it to that point and then water it. So that's kind of what I do, is I just kind of wait 2 or 3 weeks, I water it. It's under strong grow lights, so that helps it kind of dry out and use all the moisture. So functionality-wise, there isn't really too much of a problem with that regard of this terrarium if you cultivate your plants correctly and what amount of sunlight they need, how much moisture they need, and kind of get around it with a setup like this. They will survive. So like I said, I'll be making a video about how to take care of a cactus and also a video about how to take care of succulents coming up. I may do another update on this, or at least include it in that video if there's still some things I need to talk about. But that's the cactus terrarium for right now. So good luck with yours if you have one, and good luck with your plants. I'll be back in the next video.